In my early days with film photography, when I was trying to learn about apertures and shutter speeds, a lot of what I did then either had to be remembered or written down. By the time we had exposed the whole roll of film and developed it, some time would have passed before we could see the fruits of our labours. So unless we wrote down the settings in a notebook, and we rarely did that, we would have long forgotten what the settings were that we used. If we found a problem with an unsharp image, we couldn't look back and see exactly what shutter speed we used. This is now a thing of the past with modern cameras, which record a lot of data alongside the images we shoot. We can now look back at any time and look at a whole wealth of information about the aperture, shutter, ISO, lens used, date, time of day, and much more too. Now, the best way for me to show you where this information is located is by quickly showing it to you in probably the two most widely used image editing programs around, Lightroom, which we're looking at now, and Photoshop. I'm working in Lightroom at the moment, and up at the top right you can see I'm in the library module, and if I select just one of these images, you can see the one I've selected. Over on the right hand side in the histogram panel you can see quite a lot of the information I mentioned a few moments ago. We even get to see the histogram up at the top right, but just underneath that you can see with this particular image, and I'm not entirely sure why I used 160 ISO. I think that may have been a mistake and it should have been 100. 105mm lens, f11 at 1 second. But down the bottom of the panel you can see we have lots of other information which could be useful, including the capture time and date, probably the date more important than the time, but all of the details about dimensions and exposure once again. Also the camera that was used. Now I've switched to Photoshop's bridge and you can see clearly which image I have highlighted middle left there, and you can see we have a metadata tab with all of the same information. In fact, there's a heap of other information we could include, but what we've got shown to us here is probably all we're going to need, because we have the top left corner, we have f8 500ths of a second, we have 100 ISO, and again if we go down a little bit to the camera data we can see that the lens was actually a Canon 16 to 35mm zoom, but it was set at 16mm. We can see that the metering mode was center weighted average, another mistake because normally I use evaluative metering, so I'm not entirely sure why that's set. Again, probably it's been changed and I didn't even notice it. And of course it shows us the make and model of the camera too. Now it doesn't matter which image editing software you've chosen to use. If it's not Lightroom or Photoshop, whatever you're using, you're going to have the opportunity to see exactly the same information that I've shown here, and it's a great way to learn exposure. When we see something and it works for us, look back and make a mental note of the shutter and aperture, so we start to build up that correlation between what we see and what we set.